Okay.
Episode 7.
Episode 7. Another wonderful Virginia day. Monday.
Virginia Tech with the big win this weekend over Pitt.
Oh, yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's not good.
I mean, I went to UMich for undergrad, so a lot of the Southern Conference eludes me.
Yeah, well, they're terrible too. So
there's a lot of that going around this week.
All right, what are we talking about this week?
I thought we would talk about running sports medicine.
Yep.
And maybe talking about shin splints in specific.
I dig it.
'Tis the season, a lot of races going on, a lot of people prepping for races.
Definitely.
And grounding and pounding for lots of volume and stuff.
Also just recovering from the half and the full this past weekend. So.
Yes.
Yep.
Very happy. I had a couple of my athletes who had various issues going on. They were like, I have some knee pain and it's been awful. I'm like, okay, well, what's your plan coming up? Oh, well, it hurts, but I'm going to run a half marathon this weekend.
Exactly.
I was like, any way you could not do that?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe
they're like, well, I'll see how I feel that day. So I text them afterwards, and I'm like, so how'd it go? And they're like, oh, I ran the whole thing.
Of course.
And
I'm hurt worse.
Actually, they survived.
That's good.
It got better.
Nice.
I don't know what happened, but it sure as heck wasn't me.
Good. Well, why don't we use that example in terms of how we would, this one won't be so much about how we would diagnose or treat from like a hands-on standpoint, but how do we change or think about exercise for runners that have like a shin splints or some knee pain.
Oh, management. Thinking
which
work.
Which is a little bit more realistic for most people that aren't in like a necessarily a formal PT.
Yeah.
But maybe we can help them with getting back to running.
Yeah.
So, all right, so let's use that example. So you got your standard marathoner, half marathoner, let's just say half marathon, ran 13 this past weekend, comes in with
13.1.
13.1, excuse me.
That .1.
It matters.
So important.
It's on the back of your car on the sticker, so it matters.
Yep.
So they got like shin pain, classic shin splints, and calf pain or in front of the knee pain. It doesn't really matter, but they come in with a hot, irritated, tendon essentially. So what do you do? What do you do from an exercise standpoint?
From an exercise standpoint.
What are we doing right at first?
Well, usually when you're talking about a progression in shin splints / posterior tibialis pain, you're really talking about an overworked attachment point between a couple different muscles that all attach on the back of the tibia that help control the ankle, absorb force, do all the things you have to do 1,600 times every mile when you're running. So first step, of course, the dreaded deload it.
Yep.
If something gets worse, the more you use it, then the initial step is don't use it as much.
So if they ask you, hey, I want to, when you say deload, do you mean not run at all? Do you mean I can't go out and take a walk?
Run less. So just like you have to replenish electrolytes and fluids after you finish a half marathon because you've depleted those, you've put a lot of force through those tendons and their attachment points, which doesn't necessarily fit in the analogy of depletion, but it's definitely something your body needs to adapt to and push minerals and other building materials into that area.
Right.
So you need to, first step, just give it a little bit of rest, just like you would any acute injury.
So back way off on the total volume.
Yep.
If it doesn't bother you too much, you can get a little bit of a run in to get some blood flowing.
Yeah.
But just try to keep it relatively asymptomatic, not hurting too bad.
Cycling, great.
Yeah,
rowing, great. Cross training. All the things that most competitive runners know they should do.
Sure.
But they're like,
Yeah, and if you're a competitive runner, usually you're at least addicted to aerobic exercise.
Yeah.
So a lot of them will at least say like, hey, you know what? All right, fine, I'll give you this one. I know I should probably back off. At least I can still get that blood flow going, get the endorphin rush of, the cycling or, like you said, anything that's going to stay away from that loading response, but that's going to still give them that same good feeling.
Yeah.
Which probably gets blood flow into the whole body anyway.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
good.
Blood flow is a term that's thrown around a lot, but unless you have like an actual venous Doppler, arterial Doppler sound that says, this volume calculation, blah, blah, blah.
Which for me is where I usually just ask people, like I want to see you somewhere between like maybe a 5 to an 8 RPE, perceived exertion. It should be pretty hard. Maybe you can still maintain a casual conversation breath-wise, but you should be working pretty hard.
Active recovery.
30, 40 minutes.
Warm down, warm up.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it.
So if they cool off a little bit, they're not as hot, after, let's call it a week or 2 weeks, and they say, all right, I'm feeling better. At least for me, they're always like, when can I run? And then it becomes a question of exercise selection. So, what would you either do, from a running perspective or from a exercise perspective in the clinic?
Here's where some of my my own proclivities come in. is
I have no idea.
I looked it up right before.
Oh, nice.
My words are usually this big. So usually what I try and do is during that deload week, I'm like, all right, so we have an opportunity here. This isn't a bad thing. You're not taking 2 weeks off from running. You have an opportunity for 2 weeks to work on some things to help you run.
Absolutely.
So I sit there and be like, look, all those muscles, they just got super fatigued when you were running because you had to do this number of times, and you throw out a lot of like biomechanics and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, so now here's the fun part. If we get those muscles stronger, they'll be able to do that better for longer.
Yep.
So then less force going into places where it shouldn't be, and it's stored in that nice elastic system that we like to see in runners, like a spring.
Sure.
So I usually give them a nice progression that they can do over those 2 weeks, and then I'm like, look, when you can do this comfortably, symptom-free, once you go out, and I usually scale this way back with my runners, because if I tell them half, they're going to run full. If I tell them a quarter, they're going to run a half.
Right.
So if any of my runners are watching this, you now know my secret.
So specifically here, though, we're talking like from a running standpoint.
Yeah, rein me in.
Okay. So you'll give them a specific loading protocol. You're going to run 800 meters, walk 800 meters, whatever it is, and then that's a way to kind of build that tolerance back up versus anything specific like exercise-wise.
Yeah,
and
that's
from a gym standpoint.
That's where the XFIZ stuff comes in. Is like you don't want to underdose them because obviously if they're training for another race, you don't want to take them from routinely running, 8s to 11s on their longs to like dropping that way back, because then they're going to be at aerobic disadvantage for the next race.
And that's usually when I start to have that discussion too, that they're usually really weak, just period, because they run all the time and don't do any cross training. Or, hey, runners always say like, oh, I cross train, and that's, everybody's head is a little bit different. To me, I'm thinking, do they get any kind of strength work in whatsoever? And they'll almost always tell you like, oh, well, what do you do? Thinking, oh, they're going to tell me about their gym routine. And then they say, oh yeah, well, I also, bike 50 miles on the Capitol Trail or whatever, or I swim in a pool. So it's still just aerobic work that's not building any strength whatsoever for them. It's not a bad thing.
No.
But that's usually when we dial the running back for me, when I also have that discussion about like, look, we plenty of good research out there that you need to get a little bit stronger, so maybe we should focus on some single leg training and trying to get you a little stronger in the hips, and at least like introducing them to some progressive strength training in a way that's digestible to them, because I think more and more nowadays we're finally realizing like, oh hey, that's part of the deal, but it's still a little bit of a battle.
It still blows people's minds that you can do things other than what you want to be good at and get better at what you want to be better at.
That's a very good point. Absolutely. So what's the last kind of progression from an exercise standpoint for you once they say, hey, I went out and ran, I don't know, maybe we covered a 5K, and I got 3 good miles in, and I ran without, any real pain. Then what do you tell your runners? What's the next step for them in terms of exercise progression?
Increase power to weight ratio, and then increase the endurance of what they have to do. So I'm a big fan of kind of the progression for return to run that I ruthlessly stole from Blaze Williams in one of his running medicine conferences.
Nice. VCU shout out.
Yep, VCU shout out. Great progression. You have them do a minute of single leg kind of mini squats, a minute of single leg hops like wall touches, which one for them is like, man, I'm getting gassed after 1 minute of doing this. I'm like, well, you did something similar to this, for 2 hours the other week. So it reinforces in their mind, what they need to get better at. And then once they can do that comfortably, then you're like, great, now do it with 5 pounds,
definitely
10 pounds, which, if you think amount of force and work you have to produce to move that 10 pounds up and down, you do it 50 times, you're adding up some good amount of force.
Yeah, and it's nice because they're outside of their comfort zone of just running all the time too. So like that task usually is very specific, and I think runners can wrap their head around that. I'm going to knock out 3 sets of 1 minute, on this week, and then 4 sets, or I'm adding some weight, and it's not just like, oh, I'm run walking and then running and then adding volume, and it's all about miles up and down. This gets them out of that, and it's just like, here's your sheet, here's what you're going to do, this is what we've thought of as a protocol that matches you. I've been using a lot of jump roping lately.
Oh, I love jump roping.
As a nice return.
Love jump roping.
So I'll just do it for like either number of jumps so we can monitor that, or obviously for time, and then build up a little bit more time until they can handle that well, and then stack in either more sets or we can even pick up the speed of jumping. There's all kinds of different ways to progress that. But I think it's similar to the running a little bit from the loading standpoint, and it's just, I don't know, it's something fun and different where people work on, God forbid, a different skill. All right, cool. So to review that, to be clear here, runner comes in irritated. We're saying right away deload, number one. That's probably more important than adding something to the equation, maybe dialing something back, not stopping all the way.
Substitution
For sure. So cool off till you feel good. Phase 2 is going to be
gradual reintroduction.
A bit more specific with reintroduction. So now we're starting to run a little bit more or do a little bit more from a jumping program like we just talked about. And then that third phase is going to be either getting much stronger within some of that jumping or adding a little bit of weight to the equation to increase the power there, or doing it faster. And then last and final, really starting to build the mileage back up once we've kind of got that base back. All right, cool. I think that's pretty well rounded for the old runners out there.
That was a really good recap. Thank you.
That was very good. That was very professional out there, wasn't it?
Very professional.
You're welcome. But I feel like there's a lot of people though that don't know exactly who to go to or where to start, and that's that's a nice, relatively evidence-based progression there in terms of where the heck should I start after I started running, whether it's 3 miles or 20. Who cares?
I mean, it's everybody according to what they can tolerate. Some people are good with 5Ks. Rock on, run some 5Ks.
Sure.
Some people want to hit those big long miles, and some people are in between.
Absolutely.
Whatever you want to do. There's no judgment here. We're just trying to help you do what you want.
Absolutely.
But like someone once told me, you can do some very, very dumb things in a very, very smart way. You can do some very, very smart things in a very, very dumb way.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want to get smart things done in a smart way.
Sure, no doubt about it. Just hopefully finding somebody that can give you that intermediate, solution there.
Hopefully.
Cool. All right. I think we got it covered. Anything else from you?
No, just leave comments. As always, we're here to talk to you, the viewers.
Yep. And especially I think on the running topic, it's just such a big part of our Richmond community. If you have any other questions about running specific, things, especially with us from a strength and conditioning side of things.
Strength and conditioning, shoe wear, progressions, ankle mobility issues, like all this stuff. There's so much information out there.
Sure.
It's hard to know what to tack down and what's important, especially on an individual basis.
Yeah. So after the race, if you need more help in a very specific fashion, I would say get assessed. And certainly we can help.
Yeah.
Sound good?
If not, we'll put you in front of someone who can.
Cool. There you go. All right.
Thank you very much.
See you next time.